It's a very warm welcome to you on the Lamelle Health Pod Talk. We're so excited to be here, talking all things polycystic ovarian syndrome. My name is Sposh, and I'm so excited to be in conversation with Karen, our resident nurse slash skin expert and all things Lamelle ambassador. So excited. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you.
And Dr. Zenda, very passionate and well renowned as well, just for the focus that you've attached to female wellness, reproductive care, and just all these focuses around women's health, fertility, and PCOS as well. So we're just going to shine the spotlight and have a lovely girls catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start with that, ladies. What is polycystic ovarian syndrome? Who wants to go first?
I'll give Dr. Zenda can have the floor here.
Right. So polycystic ovarian syndrome is, and I like the fact that we put syndrome because it involves multiple aspects of areas that we look at in terms of diagnosis. So it is a condition. It is quite common. At least about 10% or 1 in 10 women live with polycystic ovarian syndrome. It is essentially an imbalance in the hormones. And the two in particular that we're looking at is either from a metabolic perspective where somebody may have insulin resistance. So something about the insulin is not working. Its natural use is to lower the glucose. But when it's not doing that, your body kind of gets a negative feedback to create more. So you get these high insulins in people living with PCOS. The other part of it, though, is what we call hyperandrogenism. So whilst all women have a small amount of testosterone that's produced in the ovaries in particular, in the case of polycystic ovarian syndrome, there is an increase in this testosterone production. So that is sort of like the bedrock. In terms of why it happens, or we actually, when you look at research, we still don't know why it happens. We know that it is hereditary, or it can run in the family. I think, and then in terms of what actually, in terms of symptomatology, what a person will present with. The big one is irregular periods. So either somebody who's skipping periods, or they're not having a period at all. This kind of signals sort of like non-ovulation. So you're not able to release that egg per cycle during your menstrual cycle. So it's the irregular periods. It's also, I spoke about the increased testosterone that then kind of manifests with certain body symptoms. So it could be overgrowth of hair, what we call hirsutism, overgrowth of hair, particularly in the male type of growth. So you find somebody growing a bit of a mustache, they may have a bit of hair just below their umbilicus,
well.
sometimes chest, sometimes chin as well. They may even experience things like balding, so losing hair, or sort of like an alopecia type of scenario. And then you get the skin issues, whether it's acne, whether it's hyperpigmentation, and then also together with the hyperandrogenism, just to maybe cut the answer short, is that it can either be something that we pick up on the blood results, or something that is seen by symptoms that I've just some of the ones that I've just mentioned. And then the last sort of like third part to the symptom triad that we look at is then the polycystic ovaries. So we look on ultrasound, we look at the ovaries. Generally, you get these fluid-filled sacs. We generally look and say, you shouldn't have more than like 8 to 10. The minute you have more than like 12, so it's sort of like a hyper, not even stimulation, just multiple cysts within the ovary. And that also prevents ovulation. But what it also does is that you've increased the tissue that actually produces the testosterone. So it's like a vicious cycle. So any two of those kind of then confirm the diagnosis.
The one you may have forgotten about, and I think it speaks to the insulin resistance part, is the weight gain and the stubborn fat that just won't go away. And we'll get to the psycho-emotional effects of that. But
100%.
what about that insulin resistance makeup makes it
Yeah.
difficult for women to shed off the weight or just have unexplainable, weight gain?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, when you then look at what the sequel of polycystic ovarian, and I love the fact that we often focus so much on just the reproductive side.
Yeah.
What then happens to the person who has polycystic? You have issues with periods, in, like I said, irregular periods. You may have issues with conception, so fertility, but also when you look at the cardiovascular system, increased risk of cardiovascular disease, increased risk of diabetes, increased risk of metabolic syndrome. So it's not just also the psychological side of things, increased risk of depression, anxiety. So it's a multi-layer skin conditions, dermatological implications. So you have to look at the patient holistically with all these things. In terms of part of the reason why the weight issue, the big one is you've got insulin resistance, so your body is unable to process carbohydrates, so to speak. So we speak of it as sugar, but in turn it's carbohydrates. So it's like there's this imbalance where your body and your metabolism doesn't know how to actually process properly your glucose or yeah.
How I explain that metabolic is, so I'm a nurse as of my background, and I also work with Lamelle. I have got a daughter that has polycystic ovary syndrome. Anyway, so I get very practical.
Yeah.
And insulin is the little key that turns on the wall of the cell and opens the cell up so that it can pull in glucose and use it for energy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if that key, so if you think about if you've ever had a key that's broken and try to put it in a keyhole and you try and open the door, you're going to struggle. Sometimes you can get it open a little bit, sometimes you have to. But it means that that door's not opening and the glucose isn't getting into the cell. What does the cell do? The cell goes, I'm hungry. Phew, I'm hungry. Your body looks around and it goes, there's glucose here? So maybe I haven't made enough insulin. Let me make more keys. So it produces more insulin. And what if we go and look at blood tests, your insulin and your glucose should be the same. The levels should be the same. But in someone with insulin resistance, the glucose is generally normal, but the insulin is raised because your body's keeping on to pour all this insulin at your body because the cells are going, help me, I'm hungry. And the body's going, she's hungry, she can't eat, there's glucose around, let me add more insulin.
Yeah.
And at a stage, what can happen is that your pancreas produces insulin. It is a hormone. Your pancreas then gets burnt out.
Yeah.
Now, in that process where your body's going, I'm hungry, your body's also storing some because it needs to get rid of the glucose.
Somewhere.
So it's storing it somewhere. Where does it store it? In my case, tummy, but sometimes I'm lucky and it's boobs, but mostly not back of arms. So you keep on picking up weight. You feel sluggish because your cells don't have the energy. You're eating because your cells are continually telling your body you're hungry.
hungry.
What do you eat when you're hungry? Your body knows that carbohydrates are burnt very easily. So it goes, chocolate, bread, bread with stuff on it. Okay.
Sauce.
So, and because you're sluggish and you're tired and you don't have the energy, you're not moving, and you just pick up weight and pick up weight and pick up weight.
Man.
And then what happens is you land up at an endocrinologist, like happened with my daughter, and he went, we need to sort this out. Food jail. You are now put into food jail.
Oh.
What does food jail mean? It means you're only allowed to eat proteins and vegetables. You're not allowed to eat anything that's carbohydrate. So nothing that grows underneath the ground. So potato.
Can't even
The
sweet
other one.
potatoes, Karen?
Can't eat sweet potatoes, can't eat potatoes. We're allowed to have a little bit of onion. You can eat vegetable that grows on top of the ground. Wheat, all wheat products out.
Absolutely not.
All sugar, any sugar. And I don't know if you've ever looked at, when you start looking at packages and the ingredients,
The labels, everything has sugar.
Everything's got sugar or
Everything's got
glucose or
wheat or whatever.
wheat or, even our boerewors has got bread in it. So
The crumbs, eh?
yeah, but
Yeah.
it works because because the challenge is if you don't lose weight, the picking up of weight
just
actually
continues.
drives the insulin resistance. So the bigger you get, the worse your insulin resistance becomes.
Yeah.
You need to lose the weight. And then you can hopefully sort out the insulin level as well. And of course, we give you medication to help you with that as well.
Right, so I want to actually speak a little bit more about the treatments and the interventions. Medically?
You know,
Medically, how does one start to navigate that space?
yeah. I think even before we get to the treatment options that we have, the one thing that comes up even as we are talking is I've always said I recognize how much as clinicians we don't explain enough, because as soon as you have made or you've done an assessment and you've made the diagnosis, first things first, sit your client down and have a conversation about what it is. Some of the biggest difficulties that people with polycystic ovarian syndrome experience, it's just gaps in the information because the doctor did not explain. Also, you spoke about it being like a sentence.
Yeah.
I always encourage clients, let's go on a journey together, because there is a lot of work that you need to do. You spoke about, the
Lifestyle.
diets.
Lifestyle.
The lifestyle
Lifestyle
is probably
so important.
a huge cornerstone. And so sometimes you'll get clients who are like, they're not really keen on medication, so to speak. Medication alone is not enough. But lifestyle, when we look at lifestyle driven diseases, the diabetes, that's where it comes from. If you just tweak your lifestyle a little bit, but a lot of clients don't often get that assistance and the help and so we're going to do 1, 2, 3. How do you pull all those resources together? So even like diagnosis, I've found so many patients who are either not diagnosed properly, so they're given this diagnosis incorrectly, but others who we've completely missed. So that's also another gap, and hence it's important for us, even as a community, to be empowered with information. You know what questions to ask. If you're not happy, you're not married to your doctor, get somebody who really can walk the journey with you. So generally, once we have diagnosed, and I'll speak more to the kind of ethos I like to use. First and foremost, we are on board together. Let's start with, where are the lifestyle areas? Something that we often don't talk about is, we just say physical exercise. So I like to say, keep active, pick something that you actually love and enjoy, because PCOS is not curable. So it means it's going to have to be a lifestyle for a very long time. Also, with the changing of your body hormones just naturally as a woman, it means there will be a time where it will even be more difficult to kind of keep things manageable. So as soon as we hit about 35, our natural estrogen drops, and that metabolism change happens as well. Slows down. So it's making somebody understand it's a lifelong thing. Even with exercise, it's important to encourage people not just to do cardio. Cardio is great because for your cardiac health, yes. But strength training, which means you're building muscle, you're actually assisting your metabolism to work a little bit faster. When you've got muscle bulk, it does wonders. And then you go to the food part of it. I generally will encourage people, get a dietitian. We all think we know what to eat, how to eat,
don't.
how to cook. Don't try and do it, because as soon as you try doing it yourself, you might succeed a couple of days, a couple of weeks, and then you fall off.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. So you need that professional input in terms of what, but also an accountability in terms of how are you keeping. If you have reached a stage where you've lost the weight you needed to, how do we change your diet back to something, or how do we tweak your diet maybe to be less prisony and a bit more
sustainable,
flexible, more sustainable.
Yeah.
And kind.
And
Yeah. And you can also, there are dietitians out there that are PCOS specialists. There are quite a
100%,
few of them,
yeah.
which is phenomenal.
It's
and
amazing.
They are amazing, and they know, and many of them have PCOS themselves.
Yeah.
So they know what you're going through. They know that the world
Exactly.
that you're living in is sugar-filled.
Yeah.
incredibly so.
Incredibly so,
And I
yeah.
guess also just for the emotional support. I mean, you mentioned this idea of going on a journey with the patient, and I wanna rope you in, Karen, when it comes to the girls. I'll call them the girls because you're mommy. How did you find that experience from diagnosis to them starting a journey, a health journey, from a diet perspective, a lifestyle perspective, how some of the challenges that they were confronted with and some of those interventions that you guys employed, but also the support that you know, then offered. Because it takes a village. I think you need people that understand what
Yeah.
you're going through so they can support you and make it a lot more bearable.
Yeah. So my oldest daughter doesn't have obvious PCOS. She had a little bit of menstrual challenges, and she had the weight gain, but it wasn't a fully diagnosed process. She actually went on a health bench for 3 months and then fell pregnant, so she's okay.
Love it for her.
Right. My youngest daughter, though, it was a long journey because initially, so my background is skin or nursing, but skincare.
Sure.
By 15, my daughter wasn't menstruating
Wow.
and she had acne. So, of course, what do? You grab her and you take her because every year I'm going, it's okay, honey, the acne will go away when you
go
start
away.
menstruating. The acne will go away when you start menstruating. It's not happening.
Wow.
So we went to, and at that stage, we had a path of managing the acne and it wasn't resolving. Got to the gynae did a sonar. She was like, yeah, there's cysts on the one side. So we've got our two symptoms. In the triad, we were diagnosed with PCOS. She wasn't too worried about it
Okay.
at that stage. We are talking quite a few years ago. And she was put onto the pill, started menstruating. She said, okay, pill for 6 months. Let's see if we can just kickstart her menstruation. She went off the pill. Oh, her skin responded very well to the pill.
Fantastic.
She started menstruating. Everything was wonderful. It was over December, so it was the right time of the
Lovely.
year. In February, she'd stopped her 6 months. We stopping the pill now because now,
Okay.
of course, we've got the menstruation. And guess what?
The period came?
She stopped menstruating and her acne came back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
Okay. So we put her back onto the pill. We, at a stage, went through the whole process of going on Roaccutane, sorting out the acne. I wasn't too worried about the polycystic ovary syndrome because, it's been diagnosed. What do we do about it?
Yeah.
And then we came upon starting to work with minoxidil.
Yeah.
And I realized the seriousness of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then she at a stage said, no, let's go to an endocrinologist. So we went to an endocrinologist and they did a full blood profile. And he was very determined to allow us to know that this is a long-term thing and that this is a challenge.
Yeah.
And that her condition is resistant. So it can be resistant. So what he was worried about is the pill that she was prescribed was the right pill for polycystic ovary syndrome and it wasn't solving her problems. And the fact that her insulin levels were it was 3 times higher than her glucose levels. So where her glucose levels were, I think her levels were around 4.5, which is very normal for glucose. Her insulin level was sitting nearly at 12. So we needed to do drastic things, and we're in the process of doing drastic things. So the path is the diet, the exercise. But then on top of that, it is the fact that my daughter used to have a nap. She's 23 now, she's studying. She has to have a nap, and she used to have a nap in the afternoon because she was so tired.
Yeah.
The constant emotionality, the fluctuations, the nearly suicidal depression, at stages I was sort of on, are we on suicide watch now? Is it bad enough? Is it that bad? Because life becomes hard.
Yeah.
She also had constant pain, which is and we now know that insulin levels that are raised also trigger inflammation.
Yeah.
And that in constant pain, her legs, she used to wake up at night with painful legs. No medication helps for that. Now she's lost about 15 kilos.
Wow.
And the pain's gone.
Yeah.
She can stay awake the whole day. She can do her work. The emotionality's improved. She smiles more often than cries, which is fabulous.
No, that's
She
beautiful.
still has her times. I mean, around menstruation, it's still very hard.
Yeah.
And there's a total improvement in that. So it's about managing it. It's about being there. It's about making the meals that don't have carbs in them. It's about finding the right food. And it's about living in a world that's filled with sugar. It's
Yeah.
something that I've
And you
now
can't
coined
avoid it.
because you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
You go to any meal, there'll be 7 things on the table that have sugar in them.
Yeah.
I laughed because last week, and no disrespect, last week was the endocrinologist's conference.
And there was sugar everywhere.
There were carbohydrates on there were the most beautiful cake pops, and everything is laden with carbohydrate. Everything's got a little deegie around it, a dough. That's something my daughter missed. She goes, I just want fish with dough around it.
Oh.
You know? But, so we just live in a world when you're invited to tea. Nobody
cakes and
has
biscuits
a
and
cucumber with a
muffins.
little bit of cream cheese on top of it. No,
No.
it's cakes and
Biscuits and
biscuits.
But I
and-
love the support that you guys have kind of formed around her, because
Yeah.
that's the other thing. You're not just educating the client or the patient, you have to educate the family in terms of what is happening
Yeah.
for that kind of support.
And friends as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned something very interesting when you were talking about the pill. So I always say the pill has a bit of like a catch-22 thing to it
Yes.
as well, because whilst it does help to decrease that testosterone, when you're on the pill, technically you're not ovulating. So it doesn't actually solve the issue of ovulation. We give it to lower down
The
the
testosterone.
testosterone with the hope that as soon as we kind of take it away, like how you did,
Margie,
that
Gani did.
your natural, your normal hormones have kind of balanced, and then you can kind of kickstart your own cycle. That in itself can cause a lot of like emotional, like
Yeah.
and what we sometimes also need to add is something like a metformin.
Pre-diabetic.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of behave like you're pre-diabetic.
Well, your body technically is behaving a little bit like you're diabetic.
Okay.
That insulin resistance, it's behaving like it. But again, the idea, all the things that we give you in terms of medication, there's, we also give what we call ovarian stimulation.
Okay.
Things to improve the ovulation. So I don't know if I'm allowed to mention names, but basically, yeah.
There are options in that space.
Yes, in that space. So all the medication doesn't actually fix the polycystic ovarian. It kind of just tries to bypass and open keys, back doors, to be able to. And that's also the reason why it's so important to have a holistic plan. In absolutely resistant cases, we may have to do some kind of surgical intervention where we kind of go and drill using laparoscope. So we put cameras in with instruments that kind of operate whilst you're outside. We drill on the ovaries to try and release that tissue, or rather burn that tissue that produces the amount of high amounts of testosterone. So the plan can be, like you're saying, a long journey.
Yeah.
Support is important. Something that is probably almost always overlooked is the psychological effect. Remember, it's the hormonal changes and the effects on your mood, but also it is about the idea of, will I be able to have children if I want children?
Yes.
It's
the fertility
idea,
one is a big one.
Yeah, but even before we get to the fertility, the younger ones in particular, they are at a stage where things like weight gain can cause a lot of trauma, acne, a lot of
Self-esteem
trauma,
issues.
self-esteem, bullying, and they have to deal with all of that over and above the studies and just teen life. And so that's why I think support from the family, from the clinical side, is absolutely crucial without missing any of the areas that can be affected.
Fantastic. Dr. Zinda, I want us to get into fertility a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is something that is an existential question that many women have,
Yeah.
especially women who've always felt that they intended to be moms, and then they're confronted with something like this.
Sure.
And often that communication can suggest that it's almost impossible to have children. What would you say to a mom right now, or rather a young woman who's planning to be a mom, who'd love to be a mom?
Yes.
She's living with PCOS and she's tried, perhaps also exhausted her efforts on conceiving.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ways to go about it? when you're living with PCOS.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, it is not impossible to fall pregnant just because you've got PCOS. To pick your doctors carefully because, like I said, you
And
want
go to a doctor because
Yeah.
I found the first lady I picked up with PCOS in my industry was a girl with acne who's like, look at me, I'm fat, I've got acne, I'm not getting a baby. And I go, okay, they've been trying for 2 years, 2 or 3 years. I'm like, have you been to the gynae? And she went, why should I go to the gynae?
And I found them to be better than
Honey,
GPs, actually. I don't
you
know.
want to be pregnant, you need the gynae.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the question you're asking, why a GP, why not a GP and go to a gynae? I think there's nothing wrong with GPs. You do get some really amazing GPs who even have a speciality in either reproductive health or endocrinological health.
Sure.
But it's also the levels of care. And that's why it's okay if you see your GP and you're like, I'm not entirely happy, go see a gynae. It's a bit more specialized, it's a bit more expensive, yes, but you're more likely to get all the information and the kind of tests that need to happen. But even with the gynae, there is an extra layer, which is the fertility specialist, which we might then have to send you there. And it brings me to the question you asked about fertility. I remember so clearly in I think it was in varsity, we would do our practicals in Albert Lutuli, and there was this consultant who would literally, he was mean. He would literally, as soon as a woman that he thinks has a BMI that is slightly higher and they want a baby, he'd be like, I'm not going to talk to you until you've lost 10% of your body weight.
Ooh.
Go away, right? Now,
But
that's...
10% makes a difference
It
sometimes.
does. No,
Just
no,
that
it does.
10%.
It's just
Yeah,
10%.
it
Get you
does.
pregnant.
Exactly. Just and that's why, but it's also in the way that
That they
it's
communicate it.
communicated,
I mean,
and
You're
stuff.
big,
So
I'm not going to help you.
Yeah. No.
As a big, beautiful
on.
woman,
But you know
I
what?
take exception to that.
Like, ask all the men. You don't go to a woman's body.
No,
body
don't
weight.
touch
Do
it.
not
Do
touch
not.
it. But that's also another thing we need to really normalize, and it becomes a barrier when people are struggling to lose weight and they don't know what to do. And it's like, just go see a doctor. Because there are other ways that we can help with weight loss, and we can acknowledge that it's not easy. And with insulin resistant, you are most likely not going to be able to lose all the weight that you need just on pure or sheer will.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
You're
help
not
that you need
ever
there.
going to be a thin girl.
I love that you mentioned that, because I was going to say it's also okay to be body positive,
Yes.
and to know that you're making all these efforts,
Yeah.
but ultimately there's the backdrop of this condition, and of course you don't use it as an excuse,
Yeah.
but to be content with the strides that you make.
Yeah.
The exercise and the diet and all the lifestyle changes that you make and probably work maybe 10 times harder than the next person.
You will be.
Can be slow when it comes to the results part of
Yeah.
it, but you need to be proud of that and embrace
Yes.
that process
100%.
and fall in love with your new form, because also thin doesn't mean healthy.
Yeah.
So, I've just been conscious about that I do want to shed off the weight, and I have, but not as fast or as much as I would want, but I'm just proud of just being healthy.
Yeah.
It is, to me, it's about being healthy. And sorry,
Yeah.
I'm falling
Yeah.
in here.
No.
Is that it is, and I mean, I'm probably preaching to myself as well, is that it's about enjoying who you are,
Yeah.
but it's also about realizing that there is so I know that the fitness guys go, don't work on BMI. We have to use the BMI because there's a point at which your BMI gets dangerous for you.
100%. Yeah.
So we need to make sure that you are a healthy weight.
Yeah.
And, when we look at the long-term effects of PCOS, the risk for type 2 diabetes, the risk for dyslipidemia, which means that you've got high cholesterol, the risk for heart attack.
For heart attack,
Yes.
yeah.
And I'm very aware of the fact that because I'm in my 50s now, I'm even a higher
Higher
risk
risk.
for heart attacks.
Yeah.
If I had PCOS before, I would be an
Even
enormous
more.
risk.
Yeah.
And you know that we as women die of silent heart attacks.
Yeah.
You just
Just
go
like
in
that.
the middle of the night.
Heart attack or heartbreak?
Okay, we're not going to go there right
We're
now.
not doing heartbreak
Heartbreak
today.
today. We're going there? All right. So we need to
Yeah.
make sure that
Yeah.
we are healthy and that we are and so we owe it to ourselves as well. And we owe it
100%.
to our daughters to make sure that they are healthy.
Be responsible, but be self-compassionate.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah, yeah.
that's really
Yeah,
the balance
definitely.
that
Yeah.
we strike. Yeah.
And I think the responsible part is be accountable, but know that you also need help. I think
Yes.
never ever should somebody feel alone. For me, that has been the sort of like the key ingredient. When people feel supported, when they feel like they can get accurate information, when they feel like they can make mistakes. Oh, I slipped. I've
Yeah.
fallen back on my diet or on my medication. It
How do I get back on
how do I
track?
get back on track, to feel like they can come back to you, because sometimes people disappear on you because
That-
Because-
It's a slice of
Oh,
bread.
I've set
You
I
know.
myself
looked
back.
at a cream cheese.
I
cake.
looked. I didn't
I
even
just-
touch it. I just looked at it.
I woke up in the middle of the night.
Yeah. I spontaneously have ice cream cake losing its position in my fridge.
It's made its way
it's
to
a
me.
superpower.
To that end, I think
Cheesecake.
cheesecake.
It's gone.
I think to that end, it can feel lonely.
Yes.
Where do people go? Let's start with you, Karen. Like, where do people go to get that information and some of those intervention, instruments, and community as well? Maybe Dr. Zena, you can talk about where do we? I mean, the Health Pod Talk is a community right here where you don't feel you can be seen and you feel seen, that it's a journey that you're not walking alone.
Yeah.
But how do people go about that?
So I think if you go and search on the internet, there are quite a few physical support groups. So I know for the infertility, there are quite a few support groups. For PCOS, there are a few support groups. Use your discernment, because sometimes people do get ridiculous with what they
Information
believe.
overload.
And there is a little bit of overload. From a Lamelle point of view, our Lamelle Pharma page has a link where you can actually fill in a questionnaire. We've got on Instagram, we've got the PCOS Ovaria page. Please go and chat to us on that. And I think in the future, we will probably be formalizing more of support group kind of conversations. But
Yeah.
we're there. And I was just sitting here thinking we should start a PCOS gym. You know?
Yes.
Yeah, with special discounts.
Special discount.
Bring
I
your-
thought you were
bring
going to
your
say
ovary
with,
scan.
with,
No.
with special fitness people who understand the
Bring your
condition.
I think that is, and I
Yeah.
mean, no, it is.
That's beautiful.
It is a joke, but it's maybe something that we need to look at. Is to
Safe
have
spaces of
safe
community,
spaces.
Karen.
Yeah.
Yes, because also those gyms are intimidating, especially when you're told go for the high intensity training and you've just got these buff men and you've got your Winnie the Pooh belly. It's just it just becomes
We should
depressing.
just crowd. We should crowd them. You know,
know?
like the,
But you
Take
know,
over.
but
a
I think
PCOS takeover.
women's gym,
takeover, yes.
like women's gym would actually do. I mean, I know there's quite a few around, but I think they would do well, because also I think isolating PCOS on its own can feel
It's othering.
it's lonely.
Yeah.
But when you think of like body weight in totality, probably a lot more women than not, have struggled with that. Those who are post delivery, they want to shed the weight and they feel a little bit offish with going to the traditional gyms.
Yeah.
So I think even support groups, I've often said whenever I've been invited to support groups, that's actually a stride forward, because
Yes.
sometimes you get support groups where it's just a bit of a kumbaya, like let's feel not sorry for
Trauma
ourselves.
bonding.
Yeah, but then you don't have anybody who is, like either
Actively educated.
And that
Yes.
accountability, who
Yeah.
actually evokes that accountability.
so the support groups have to have that balance of there's accurate information, and actually we are moving forward in our condition or in our symptoms or whatever that may be, but it still provides that safe space of I'm not alone.
Embodying wellness, essentially.
Yeah.
How do people get in touch with you, Dr. Zenda?
So I am for physical consultations. I'm based at Morningside Medic Clinic, corner of Rivonia and Hill Road. What I love probably even more, because it reaches beyond our office space, is
Yeah.
our social media platforms. And we really do try to educate, everyday women like ourselves on just their body, being able to sense when things have changed, being able to advocate for themselves when they feel like something is off, and not be dismissive of that. So we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we are on Facebook at dr.gynae.
At dr.gynae.
Yeah.
Ladies, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful conversation.
Love and light. Thank you.